The Mail on Sunday has published a bizarre and grim hit piece on Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner. This is how they splashed the story. Tories accuse Rayner of basic instinct ploy to distract Boris. The article goes on to say, Tory MPs have mischievously suggested that Miss Rayner likes to distract the Prime Minister when he is at the dispatch box by deploying a fully clothed parliamentary equivalent of Sharon Stone's infamous scene in the 1992 film Basic Instinct. Now, in case you weren't aware, in Basic Instinct, Sharon Stone's character is brought in for questioning by the police. In an interview room full of men, she slowly uncrosses and then recrosses her legs without wearing any underwear beneath her short dress. Angela Rayner was, of course, wearing underwear, so the similarity with Stone's character appears to simply be that Labour's deputy leader dared to move her legs. As well as misogyny, the article didn't hide its classism. It quotes a Tory MP as saying, she knows she can't compete with Boris's Oxford Union debating training, but she has other skills which he lacks, which in that sense presumably means moving her legs. She has admitted as much when enjoying drinks with us on the Commons terrace. Now, Rayner has actually shown herself to be pretty good at the dispatch box. There have been a number of occasions where she's clearly rattled the PM. There isn't a big discussion about why does she keep losing? But these Tory MPs don't seem to think that's possible because she didn't go to Oxford. She couldn't possibly be a decent debater. She couldn't possibly hold Boris Johnson to account because she wasn't a member or president as he was of the Oxford Union. It is, of course, on the whole, a ridiculous story. It is embarrassing it got published, but it is worth noting, if it does contain any element of truth, to be honest, I'm sure it doesn't, but if it did, it's not Rayner who comes out badly. The implication from both the journalist and the quoted Tory MP is that we have a Prime Minister so sex-mad and distractible that he can't hold a line of thought when a fully clothed woman moves her limbs in his line of sight. MPs from all parties were quick to condemn the story. This was Labour's Rachel Reeves.
I'm just not surprised because this sort of sexism and misogyny, it is frankly the sort of rubbish that female MPs, but also female staffers in the House of Commons have to put up with every single day. And, when I hear a minister just now say, I haven't heard this sort of thing before, talk to your female colleagues. Talk to the women who work in your office because a lot of them would have experienced this sort of thing.
And here is Chris Philp, the technology minister.
When you read what was written by the Mail on Sunday's political editor, what was your response?
I was appalled. I was appalled that that sentiment was being expressed. It's offensive. It's misogynistic. The Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers have been absolutely right to roundly condemn that sentiment and to offer support to Angela Rayner on this issue. I've never heard anyone say anything like that or even hinted it. And if I did, I would be disgusted and appalled. Nobody should have to suffer the kind of misogynistic abuse which that sentiment amounts to.
That was Chris Philp attempting to give the impression that misogyny would never go unnoticed in the House of Commons, which is pretty hard to believe given another story that came out this weekend. The Sunday Times reports that 3 members of Johnson's cabinet have been referred to the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme over sexual misconduct allegations. That's as well as 2 members of the shadow cabinet. The cabinet ministers and Labour frontbenchers haven't yet been named, but they are amongst 56 MPs who have been referred to the watchdog over some 70 complaints. The Sunday Times had this detail. At least one complaint is believed to involve criminality and concerns an allegation that an MP bribed a member of staff in return for sexual favours. Remember, there are only 650 MPs, so if you've got more than 50 of them who are now having complaints such as these made about them, that does tell you about something of the kind of people who are in there and what they can get away with. In response to both stories, Tory party co-chairman Oliver Dowden was asked whether Westminster was a safe place to be a woman.
Yes, I do think it's a safe place to be a woman. And I think actually we've made big improvements over the past 20 or 30 years. And some of the things that happened, I'm sure, when you were a young reporter and when I started out in Westminster certainly wouldn't happen now. And I think that's something that has improved very much for the better.
Now, that is not an answer that should fill anyone with confidence. Do you think Parliament is a safe place for women? Well, it's a hell of a lot safer than it used to be. And you should know as a woman who is a reporter who's reported in Parliament for a while. That is such a low bar to start from with that sort of nod, wink, wink. You know what used to happen in there. It's a little bit better than that.
Part of the absurdity here is a pretense whenever this kind of thing is called out that it's just a few bad apples. And it's particularly absurd when we have a prime minister Boris Johnson with a litany of sexist comments behind him. He said a few years ago that when a woman colleague offers an opinion, you should just pat her on the bottom and send her on her way. He talked about the feebleness of the modern Briton. This is Boris Johnson. The feebleness of the modern Briton, his reluctance or inability to take control of his woman. And as you said, there are class connotations to the sexism here. Not all women are the same in this view. Angela Rayner is a single mum. Our Prime Minister thinks single mums are, quote, ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive, and illegitimate. Angela Rayner has a northern accent. Our Prime Minister thinks the people of Liverpool, you'll remember, are drunks and hooked on grief because they led a heroic campaign against the whole apparatus of sneering class power in the media and police after 97 fans were killed at Hillsborough. Boris Johnson is distinctive only for saying the quiet part out loud. He's distinctive in the same way as this Mail on Sunday article is, expressing ruling class bigotries without restraint and with a kind of cheeky glee. But the problem is not incivility. It's not just how we talk. It's what people do. It's how this kind of contempt allows overwhelmingly white male Tory MPs to cut funding to women's refuges, so that Women's Aid call this a crisis where domestic violence services are £200 million short of the funding they need, and Women's Aid say, are being turned away. Just ask yourself what kind of politics and what kind of politicians get us to that horrific place where women are struggling, and the cost of solving it, £200 million, Women's Aid say, is small change compared to, say, corporation tax cuts or the tax cuts for the wealthy that those rich Tory MPs have given themselves in recent years. It's a politics where Jacob Rees-Mogg sneers that women should complain to the police after a serving police officer murders a woman. That was his advice. Maybe you should take it up with the police. It's not just about an article then, and it's not just about one woman who has a platform, so unlike most, she's able to complain and be heard. I read rumours today reported in the press that 70 MPs may have allegations of sexual violence against them in the parliamentary process. Many of those involve women who are humiliated in the shadows, who are cowed into silence or ignored when they complain. That's how power works. Power works so that MPs get away with harassing women, bosses get away with harassing women. The same politicians give bosses tax cuts and then use the money that the public exchequer loses to cut services to women desperately needed domestic violence services. That's what structural misogyny looks like in our society.
Let's take a look at some more responses to that article in the Mail. So this was a fairly depressing call made to Ben Kentish on LBC.
I just think you're forgetting about human nature and basic instincts, which Sharon Stone's film was called. I mean, why did she have to sit in front of him and cross her legs and wear
because
a short
she's
skirt?
the deputy leader of the opposition, Josephine. That's why she sits opposite him. What's she done wrong in your view? Apart from having legs and crossing them.
Why does she have to flaunt herself? It's like being a prostitute.
Sorry. In what way has she flaunted her? In what way has she flaunted herself? In what way has she flaunted herself?
She should be exercising a little bit more decorum.
But sorry, I don't understand. She has two legs. She's dared to cross them in the House of Commons.
It's a basic instinct for men to ogle women, and they've done it since the beginning of time. And you, with all your fancy words and theories and what have you, are not going to change that.
I almost am lost for words, Josephine. I don't understand how you... I am.
Should be.
Yes, I'm quite. So I should be.
You go and watch
given what you've just said.
Program, the male and females, they flaunt themselves in front of each other.
Hold on. In what way has Angela Rayner sitting where her job dictates that she has to sit on the front bench next to Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions, what is she meant to do, in your view, Josephine? What is she meant to do?
Equal in that sort of way, because they're not.
But what is she meant to do?
Wear sensible clothes and not...
But no one's suggesting she hasn't. No one's suggesting this is about her clothes. This is about the fact that she's uncrossed her legs.
No, she was. She was. I've seen the picture. I've got the Daily Mail and I just laughed and turned the page over.
Okay, I've got it in front of me.
Right.
She's wearing...
What is she trying to say? She's trying to distract him from saying something sensible, because we all know that he likes the ladies and he expresses it more than most people. And I just think you're just so stupid for falling for her rubbish.
Now, that was a very gross response. We've got two other responses which were embarrassing for a different reason, though. Commenting On the Mail on Sunday piece, Boris Johnson tweeted this at 11:07 a.m. on Sunday. As much as I disagree with Angela Rayner on almost every political issue, I respect her as a parliamentarian and deplore the misogyny directed at her anonymously today. Perfectly reasonable tweet. The problem was, just 16 minutes later, Nadine Dorries tweeted this. As much as I disagree with Angela Rayner on almost every political issue, I respect her as a parliamentarian and deplore the misogyny directed at her anonymously today. Exactly the same tweet. It could not be any clearer that both social media teams or both politicians, whoever it was, copied and pasted a suggested tweet from Tory central office. It doesn't seem like they are being particularly sincere here. Chris Philp, government minister, though, had other ideas.
The exact same tweet. What's going on here?
Well, I mean, they share the same view. Their colleagues in government.
They share the same view to the word.
Yeah, I mean, look, Nadine is my boss, and she feels very strongly about the place of women in politics and that this sort of abuse is unacceptable. I'm sure she'll have discussed it with the Prime Minister. They'll have reached the same view, and they've used the same words. There's nothing surprising that two colleagues in government have exactly the same view and use the same words.
There is nothing surprising about two human beings sitting down at a keyboard and tapping out exactly the same sentence construction.
They've got the same view on this issue.
Honestly, you're trying to maintain that the Culture Secretary didn't copy and paste this.
Well,
It wasn't something that was sent to her. These aren't her own words. They're clearly not her own words because they were said by the Prime Minister 15 minutes before.
Look, I mean, I've heard Nadine talk about this kind of issue in private quite a lot. And I can tell you the sentiments being expressed there are sentiments I've heard her express countless times over the last 9 months that I've worked with her. So it doesn't surprise me at all that she's expressing herself so strongly, but nor does it surprise me that she and the Prime Minister are saying exactly the same thing.
Doesn't surprise me that they're saying exactly the same thing.
Oh, Michael, Chris Philp has form. Here's a little personal story for you. He was once unsuccessfully the Conservative candidate for my parents' constituency. And my mum, who works in public health, saw him spreading dodgy information about hospital closures. So she told him several times, he heard, and then he just kept repeating the same dodgy facts. There's nothing new about this. Truth has a very marginal place in our politics. It is at best a distant cousin of most politicians. And that's worth saying. It's worth saying that this is old news because we hear a lot about post-truth politics these days after Brexit, when people voted for something that most liberal journalists didn't like, and suddenly they were worried about lies in politics. It's a theme now to talk about lies in politics. Well, that anti-Brexit campaign was led, among others, by two former prime ministers, David Cameron, who, of course, ironically enough, had broken Britain with austerity cuts that played an undoubted role in causing Brexit. But the other ex-prime minister who played such a leading role in the anti-Brexit campaign was Tony Blair, who broke trust in politics by issuing a signal lie about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, which didn't just cause Britain to leave a trading bloc, but killed 1 million people. Alistair Campbell, great anti-Brexit warrior in the name of truth and very opposed to post-truth politics. It is a kind of bizarre Alice in Wonderland moment that Alistair Campbell, the spin doctor who lied and 1 million people died, can be the warrior against post-truth, can be the warrior against lies. So I think it's time we have a conversation about dishonesty in our politics, not one skewed that only talks about dishonesty when people vote for things that BBC and Guardian journalists dislike, but one that is attentive to the dishonesty that structured our whole politics for as long as anyone can remember.